On his computer in his office, and we're broadcasting from there today. So just remember, I'm Dorothy Mae Mercer. We have an interesting guest this afternoon, a lady by the name of Alicia Castello Holly. She was born and raised in Venezuela. She's lived in various countries around, lived in Australia for a while. She has a nice husband who travels with her, and their fun is traveling all over the world. And she's managed to pick up some college degrees. She has a couple master's degrees, and she's working on a doctorate and talks about founding her own university. I don't know. She's a really crazy lady. But the interesting thing for us is that she's planning to move to California. So are we lucky or what? Today, I think she wants to tell us a little bit about her latest book that she's writing. So we'll turn it over to Alicia. So, Alicia, welcome to the program. Welcome to Talk Story TV.
Thank you, Dorothy, alias David Mercer. Very, very happy about the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I'm actually speaking from Slovakia, where we're traveling at the moment. As you said, I love traveling. I grew up in a small town in Venezuela, and I left almost 20 years ago. So I lived in 9 countries, and I realized that we're more alike than different. So I really enjoyed that part of being a global citizen and just connecting. And I'm very happy to be here because I want to talk about one of my books. That is a mature book and one of the book in the making. Many years ago, one of my children had severe depression and tried to commit suicide. Ooh. And that was a wake-up call for me. Being so full of life and passionate and enthusiastic about things and moving, and just so in love with life. I really had a hard time with that, and I couldn't understand that. The other thing that is not in my bio was that when I was 13, I fell off a horse and I was in coma for several days. So it was sort of a realization that, wow, we have this great gift called life, that we should take advantage of that. So I couldn't understand why one of my children would not be so in love with life like I was. And we left Venezuela together when they were very small. I left my country with 2 kids, 2 boxes, and 2 suitcases to do an MBA.
That's amazing.
So I'm a firm believer that you do your destiny. Yeah, it's a great story. Excuse me, it's a great story. And I was a single mom for many years, and it never stopped me from believing in what I could do and following my passions and doing things. So what I realized when that started to happen, when I started to see depression affecting my family, was that, first of all, it's not one person's problem. So it's a problem for everybody, for the community, for the family, for society, for the friends, for the school. And I wanted to do something about it, and I didn't know what to do. And I did what scientists do. I started researching and trying to understand how the brain works. And I became fascinated by that topic. And I learned a lot about that. And we were very lucky that my child didn't succeed. Some of their friends committed suicide and succeeded. It's a big problem when people have those deep depressions. So in one part we were lucky, but in another part is that we were doing things deliberately to foster happiness. And I realized then that we have an epidemic of unhappiness. And there was nothing that I could do that would give me more personal satisfaction than to work in happiness. Now, my professional work has been in science and has been in economic development. I'm an expert in innovation, entrepreneurship, and venture capital. And that's how I made my money. And that's how I made money and jobs for a lot of people. And I'm very proud and humble at the same time. But that doesn't mean that personally I don't feel the need to help people and to share happiness with other people, because we need that as much as we need economic development. Of course, coming from a developing country, you don't see that because everybody's happy, because everybody's going through so many challenges. As I had a friend who said once, if you open the door in the morning, you don't know if you're going to come back alive. So you make the best of your life. And I'm thinking, how could that be? Now that I live in a lot of developing countries, I could see some reasoning. So there are two things that I want to do. One is I want to plant the seeds of happiness. I want to raise the awareness that we shouldn't take happiness for granted, that happiness is something we need to work at every day. Like there's so many things. You work with your food, your exercise. I don't know, Dorothy, if you have any examples of situations where you realize, wow, I need to do something about it, because it doesn't happen by itself.
That's right. That's right. You have to get out and go for it.
Yes. So I wrote that first book.
Is so good for your outlook. Whenever I feel depressed, if I get out and walk, breathe the air, and get moving, it creates what do you call it? Endorphins.
Endorphins.
And helps you. Yes. Whereas what you really want to do is just lay down and pull a blanket up over your head. You need to get out. Yeah. Go on.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
So there's some things that I realized that were being effective, and some things were not being effective. And I started researching how the brain works and how the mechanism of happiness works, and what is the opposite of that, which is fear and pain. And it's interesting because we don't remember physical pain.
We don't?
But we remember emotional pain.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's right.
So when when I was in coma, I fell off a horse, I broke my appendix, I was in intense pain, I don't know, because I don't feel any of that anymore. But I remember feeling the fear that I was going to die. So, wow. and then I remember also feeling peaceful about it. I said, best thing ever. But when you talk to people realize that, yes, the mechanism of fear and pain is a mechanism that lives in the brains. It's something that you feel emotionally more than physiologically. And it has a basic reason, and it is that for us as animals, it is critical to our survival that we remember pain. But it wouldn't be critical for our survival to remember pain in the sense that it would immobilize us. So the brain has a mechanism to remind us of that pain without feeling physically the pain. If you burned your hand, you don't remember the pain that you felt when you burned your hand, because that would immobilize your hand. But you remember the feeling of the pain. And it exaggerates the pain into the future. So the mechanism of fear and pain lingers into the future after the event. The mechanism of happiness goes completely different, because it's not critical to our survival. So when we feel happiness, we start decomposing the elements, the biochemical elements that capture happiness.
And
if you think, it is very interesting. Happiness lives in anticipation. It's what I call the anticipation mechanism. So you are happiest before an event takes place. And as soon as an event takes place, your brain starts to decompose whatever made you happy, decompose the chemical elements, because you don't need that for your survival. And if we think about that from a pure biological perspective, when we were in the caves and we had a good meal and we felt contented for a good meal, if we continued feeling that sensation, we would have not gotten up to get the next meal.
Okay.
So once we are aware of how the happiness mechanism works versus the pain mechanism, we understand that happiness lives in the future in anticipation. So you get excited before something happens because your expectations about happiness are highest before that event, before you get married, before you graduate, before you go on that trip. That is when your maximum enjoyment happens, before the event. And it's building your brains and your expectations.
Okay. So then how do we put that to good use in our lives?
Well, that is great. The interesting thing is that because we are not only animals, we're rational animals, we can rationalize and then we can build up memories of happiness. And that is the best way to keep happiness coming. Now, because fear and pain is so locked into our system, that is what makes us talk about things. And we have an overwhelming, how would I say that? Overwhelming messages about fear and pain that fills the media and our families. So we talk about the dramas. So we talk about the bad things. So, we gossip. We criticize. We talk about what's happening in other parts of the world because that makes the news, because that is what locks in with our pain. That is really there. But there's no news about happiness. We have very few moments where we celebrate. We have some. We have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, we have Independence Day, all over the world. We have few of those. But the majority of stimuli that we receive from our communication, through media, through personal communication, through social media, is negative. And that is why we have an epidemic of unhappiness. Because we don't realize that we need to rationalize and bring happiness back in. So I usually ask people, when was the last time you hugged yourself? When was the last time you think, wow, I'm such a great person? Or you told somebody else, you're meaningful to my life. Or, this is what I like best of you. When was the last time that we had a situation in families where we had a round of applause for each other? We said, one of the things that I tell my friends and my clients when I do workshops is, get a piece of paper and a pen and write the best things you like about your family and start a virtuous circle of happiness. We don't do that. But we're pretty good at gossiping and criticizing and, not only criticizing other people, we also criticize ourselves. So we don't realize that we don't really make the world the happiest place to be. And we need to do that consciously. So that is the purpose behind the first book that I wrote called Falling in Love with Your Life, where I explain 12 steps that we took that help build up that strength of happiness in each individual. And then I did several courses with other people. I decided to spend some time doing that. And it was the head of a girls' schools in Iran who told me, why don't you write this as a book instead of a set of exercises? And that triggered my effort to write the book. And I have a website called Falling in Love with Your Life. And we have a Facebook group called Falling in Love with Life. And then I started writing a second book about how the brain works and the plasticity of the brain and the biochemicals and our capacity to recondition our brain, which is something we can all do. So I don't believe in those things that we're made that way or the other way, because I know our brain is plastic. So our brain acts as we tell our brain it should act. And of course, living in different countries, I've realized that there's cultural rules, and you adapt to those rules fairly easily.
Yeah.
And then I realized, well, this is just becoming an academic exercise, and I didn't want to have another academic exercise, as you said. I've done a lot of studying. I like studying. I actually do. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. I enjoyed it immensely. But I wanted to do something that was more mundane, more common wisdom. And I've learned so much from talking to people about happiness that is unbelievable. I spent 2 months in Saudi Arabia, and I was just fascinated by that. Now I've been from Sweden and Finland all the way through the Baltic. We're now in Slovakia. We're going to go down to Romania, going to Albania, and it's so much common wisdom. And I kept thinking, oh wow, I wish I had known that. That's really interesting and powerful. And so I decided to start a new book called Co-Creating Happiness, and we have a website called co-creatinghappiness.com.
All right.
It's like a cooperative. We create happiness together. Mm. And what I'm doing in that book is I'm compiling wisdom from people from all over the world. So each person has a page to give his or her words of wisdom to the world. And amazing things have happened with that book. I started that 3 months ago, and we have until the end of October. I could do a little bit of an extension, but we want to publish the book by December. And it's going to be a coffee table book. It's a book that is very easy to read. It's one of these books that I wish I had, where you just open a book, a page, and that message is the message that could change your life. That's the type of book I want to write. And that's what I'm doing. I have people from Algeria, of course, Venezuela, Chile, the U.S., a lot of people from the U.S., Australia, a lot of people from Australia. I have a couple from Macedonia, people from Estonia, people from Malaysia, Philippines. Ways that people talk about happiness, and the things that have happened are absolutely incredible, magical. When I started the book, it's just amazing. When I started the book, I decided that I was going to send postcards to people that contribute to the book from wherever I was. And somebody said, why don't you create an Indiegogo campaign so you can give some of these books for free? So I said, well, I'll do that. And so we're raising funds to give the book for free, 3,000 books for free in schools around the world. And we will continue with that, but this is just a starting point. Mm-hmm. And then a person who edited my book on finance wrote to me, and he said, I think this is a fabulous thing. I would like to contribute. He was the second person that contributed to the campaign. And I said, I'll get you a postcard. And he said, where are you? Because he knows I travel. And I said, I'm in the Baltic region. And then he said, my father is from the Baltic region, but he was a Jew and he was expelled. I had just posted a tweet in Latvia about a church. And there was a guy who said, that's not a church, it's a merchant's house. And I said, well, thank you for correcting me. This is a random thing. Thank you for correcting me. And I looked at the person who had corrected me, and he was the head of the Jewish Association in Latvia. Oh. And I said, oh, by the way, I just got this most amazing email from a guy whose father escaped, but he changed his last name. And I asked the editor of my books, do you know anything else? Because he changed his last name as well. And he said, all I know is this word. So I sent it to the other guy, and we found the town where this guy's father was from. Oh. Just because of this book. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Some of the people who are contributing to the book are cancer patients. And I met in Munich with a friend of mine who went to one of my workshops several years ago in California. And she had always lived in the same town, which is okay. I know a lot of people who do that. And she asked me, how do you do traveling? And I said, well, the first step is the hardest. I know that for everything that you do in life. But I did tell her I learned a lot about myself when I started traveling, about what were my real values, because you get tested. What is it really important to you? And she said, well, I'm a single mom. I have my kids. And I said, I was a single mom too. So, it's just when you're ready, your time is perfect. 2 years later, she moved to Istanbul. So she's freelancing in Istanbul for a year. And she sent me a note about this book. And I said, well, this is what we're doing. I'm traveling now with my husband. And she said, oh, I'm in Istanbul, but I'm going to be in Germany. And we happen to be in Munich the same weekend.
Okay.
So we met in Munich. And then she said, why don't we do a teleconference with her friends and some of the groups of women leadership where she's in. So we did that, and out of that, one person is a bone marrow cancer patient. She has a very rare type of bone marrow cancer. Well, I happen to have a friend in Perth who is a doctor who also has a very rare case of bone marrow cancer, and she wrote a contribution to my book. So we put them two together. So, it's one of these, and this just happened last week. So it's one of these things that you never know, but you never know what could happen because your energy is different. Your view of the world is different. It really troubles me when I hear people talking about war and talking about intolerance, because we are so similar. And it is so hard to understand somebody else if we have not lived their lives. And we really should make the effort to have a more convivial approach to life. My next book is going to be about peace, but this one is just about happiness. And so I'm very excited to spread the word. I don't want to have a bestseller. I want to change the way the world views happiness, because we need to do that.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. Yeah.
Did you say that you had been in Iran?
I have not been in Iran. I have been in Bahrain, Qatar, Dubai, or the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. I was in Saudi Arabia, invited by 2 universities. Mm-hmm.
And did you talk to women in Saudi Arabia?
I talked to a lot of women in Saudi Arabia. I was actually invited to give some conferences on entrepreneurship and venture capital at EFAT University, which is the first university for women. And I went to Prince Muhammad University in Al-Hobor. So I went to several places, yes. I went to Jeddah.
We hear so much about the women there. How are they doing?
Women are great. Women are just great.
But they're so
actually
oppressed.
They don't feel oppressed. I never felt oppressed. I felt very safe. I went out whenever I wanted. I did wear the abaya, which is the long coat. I couldn't wear the aqua because it kept falling. But out of respect, I wore it around. I'm sorry about my hands. I just can't stop it. My daughter is a feminist. I have a daughter who's a human rights activist. And she actually rejected a scholarship to go to Harvard. She's an amazing person. And she writes to me, and she says, how are you doing? It's very complicated when you first go to Saudi Arabia because they regulate everything, all the information that comes in. So my websites had to be approved. And if my websites were not approved, I could not receive emails. So that took me 2 or 3 days. But we managed that. And then she said to me, how do you feel wearing the abaya, the long coat? And I said to her, I feel like a princess. And she's like, you have to be kidding me. and I said, no, actually, it's pretty cool. Women were funny about that. They, actually, some of the comments were interesting because I met with a lot of women in business. And both Jeddah is like the New York of Saudi Arabia. It's very cosmopolitan, very pretty. It's pretty city. The mayor of Jeddah was smart. They built a road, and he said we're not going to use public funds to have huge pieces of art, but companies can. So he sort of got his way through, and it's a pretty city. I liked it. Of course, I was with educated women, and they realized that. They have a chauffeur. All of them is fairly cheap to have a chauffeur. Or you go out and you take a taxi. The respect for women is the same on both sides. So if it is not culturally acceptable that I speak to a man without a male relative with me, it goes the same way for them. So a man cannot talk to a woman without a female relative with him. So I felt it was more equal in that sense. Most of the shopping is done by men, grocery shopping and those things. I found that men were very, very caring with their kids, caring and loving, very respectful. I had many conversations with men, and they were extremely respectful about what I had to say. I walk on the streets, I never felt safest. The other thing that I found that was interesting was that they close the stores. They have to pray 5 times per day. So they close the store. And sometimes if you're in the store, they leave you in the store, but they go and pray. But the concept that you're going to steal something is vague to them. I was walking in a public market, and suddenly you see that they put a little bit of clothes over the merchandise out of respect for God. And they pray even there, or they go and pray to the mosque if it's closed. And they don't talk to you about selling because they're praying, and it's a short time. But the thought that somebody would steal something in a public market was, why? I asked the question, and it was like, why would you do that? And I said, well, I don't know. So I'm sure there's some of that, but it's not as I think we're more afraid of each other in the Western world. So that was an eye-opener. Yeah. And I'm having several contributors to the book from the Middle East. I found also that the girls were so self-secure that I was very impressed. Their spiritual development about who they are, they think deeply about who they are. They're not concerned about how the world sees them, but how they see themselves. And that was refreshing.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. So, how did you get along? Do you speak a lot of different languages?
A lot of people speak English. I try to learn Arabic. I speak some language. I speak Spanish. It's my mother tongue, and English. I speak a very good German and French and Italian and Portuguese, which are similar to the languages that I speak. I lived in Denmark last year. Speaking Danish is so hard. and in this place where we are, there's a lot of Russians. I don't speak Russia. I say thank you, hello. But you can speak with your hands, and people want to communicate. That's the main thing. People don't want to be judged. People are also curious. If you show that you really, what we need to show is more curiosity than judgment. And most of our judgment, I think, is driven by the information that we get from other people. So we don't know. That's something also I learned. I learned that being a scientist is that you're always inquisitive. You're always questioning what. But there's a lot of things that you don't know. Like, for example, in the Czech Republic, there's not a word for happiness. And there's not a word for unhappiness. So they have a word for joy and pleasure. But then there's a huge jump from there to happiness. So that's interesting. The other thing that I found that was interesting is that we have two types of happiness. We have what I would call the Western view of happiness is about pleasure. And the Eastern Asian view of happiness is about meaning. Meaning. What is the meaning in your life?
Oh,
how do you find meaning? What is your legacy? So one is called hedonic, and the other one is called eudaimonic.
Yeah.
So when researchers started to work, and they flag different parts of your brain. So, of course, I love chocolate. So that gives me pleasure, but it doesn't give me happiness. But I'm very happy when I have chocolate. So, that's who I am. But when they started doing research, especially cross-cultural research, the academics had a hard time because then they realized they need to ask different questions. And then there's a lot of work done, and you can find some of that on our Facebook page because I add some of that on Falling in Love with Life on Facebook. When they started asking questions, they realized, we had different views of happiness. So they first had to evaluate what happiness was, especially now that we have access to how the brain works. And so endorphins cause pleasure, happiness, not meaningful happiness. But yoga, in some of meditation, lowers your brain waves so you can achieve a feeling of self-realization from a physiological point of view. It's just the feeling is different. But the early work used to put them as opposites. And I think we need to build some bridges there. Because I don't think I don't think my sense of self-realization has to be opposed to my sense of pleasure. So I think I can feel great about bringing happiness to the world and also enjoy a good laugh and a good chocolate or a good meal. So I think we need to build some bridges there.
You've lost me already because my first question is, what's the definition of happiness? Now,
I think we need to create that definition. I don't think we have that. It is amazing to see what people say.
Yeah.
One of the things that I got, we shouldn't make comparison. It's a personal definition.
And that's, happiness is in the news so much now because of part of the Bill of Rights of the United States, is that we have an inalienable right given by our Creator to the pursuit of happiness and other things. So you've come to the United States to teach us how to pursue this stuff we're supposed to have a right to. Happiness. Yes.
Well, what are you accountable for? That's the other part of it.
Yeah. I don't know. I've often wondered, am I happy? I think so. I'm contented, and I do have pleasure, but am I happy? I don't think I'm happy all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah, I don't think we're happy all the time.
No.
Yeah, that's one thing.
In fact, the Bill of Rights doesn't say you have a right to happiness. It says you have the right to the pursuit of happiness. So that goes along with where you started. You're happiest when you are pursuing or planning your vacation. But once you get on the vacation, then you start fighting with your family and you're not happy anymore. My son-in-law loves maps, and he loves to plan vacations, and so do I. So when we get together as a family, it isn't long, and he and I get out the atlas and start planning where we're going to go next. But I'll never make it to all the places you've been to, Alicia. You are an amazing person, I could talk with you for hours. We've already talked for 48 minutes, and we are barely scratching the surface of happiness here. Make sure that we know where to find your website and your books, and where we're going to find this new book too.
Thank you. Oh, you sound great. The book Falling in Love with Your Life is available through Amazon. We also have a website called Falling in Love with Your Life. That is the first book. On that web, we have a link to our web called Creating Happiness, and that is the new book. And all the information is in that web as well. You can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Falling in Love with Life. You can Google me, Alicia Castillo, or Alicia Castillo Holly. That's an interesting story there. In my country, we have two last names. We have the first last name from our dad and the first last name from our moms. And since my mom had a lot to do in bringing me up, I honor her by keeping her last name. So that's why I'm Castillo Holly.
That's the Spanish, part of the Spanish culture is the two last names. And Holly is, for our listeners, is Holley with two L's and an E, Holley. Alicia Castillo is on your picture here, so that shows. So we can go to Amazon and look for you under your name or under Falling in Love with Your Life, and there'll be links.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure having you this afternoon, Alicia, and I wish you all the best. Can't wait to have you join us in California and do what you can do to rescue this country from the cliff that we're heading for. And bring yourself happiness.
Maybe I'll be rescued.
Thank you so much, Alicia Castillo Holly.
Thank you, Dorothy. Good evening or good night, everybody. Bye.
You're welcome. Goodbye now.